Hello again, everyone. I'm Tom Nagorski, Managing Editor with the Cipher Brief, for another of our video programs here, focused today on the ceasefire agreement in Gaza. As we speak, we don't know for certain that there will be one, but focusing less on the details and the negotiations and more on what the longer-term ramifications would be if and when it comes, whether it's in the next few days or weeks or months. Great to have with us today General Frank McKenzie, the former head of Central Command, U.S. Central Command, also a Cipher Brief expert. And General, if I can just ask you to kind of give us a level set, maybe big picture, and we can drill into some of the smaller things. Obviously, right now, the world is rightly focused on hostages coming home, aid for the people of Gaza, all the things that are enumerated in the ceasefire for hostages deal. Can you talk a little bit about what may come next and maybe opening the aperture beyond the Gaza Strip itself? What ripple effects might a deal have?
First of all, great to be with you, Tom. I always enjoy talking to the Cipher Brief. You guys do great work, and I'm glad to help you in any way that I can. I think Hamas has got to be pretty satisfied with where they are right now. They've been severely attrited by Israel. Much of their military echelon leadership's been destroyed, but they still survive, and they're still going to survive in Gaza. And the Israelis have actually contracted to redeploy and to pull out, and they're going to be the last man standing in Gaza. Now, they're going to be beat up pretty badly. A lot of their elite fighters are going to be gone, but as I read somewhere here recently, it doesn't take elite fighters to actually maintain control. You just need thugs on the street with guns. And that could very well be what we will see. So I think Hamas has got to believe they've managed to survive against all odds here at the very end. The path that's forward seems to be one where they will still retain a presence in Gaza. Now, on the other side of the equation, the Israelis are getting something very big. They're getting the hostages back, if that happens. And I think that's a much larger if than anybody is willing to say right now. I think that's still a very big if, at least to me, based on past performance of Hamas and other terrorist regimes in the region. So let's say it happens. The Israelis do get their hostages back. And that's a huge win for them there. At the same time, they've got to decide how they're going to prevent future attacks from Gaza coming back into Israel. They'll have plans for that. They'll be able to do it. But it will be it's something where I think both sides, but particularly Israel, I think, is going to be a little dissatisfied with the results of it. At least that's my take as I see it. Setting aside the hostages. Hostage is a huge win. But from a geopolitical point of view and a national security point of view, you're still leaving Hamas in Gaza. Admittedly, they're beat up pretty badly, but they will rebuild. There will be money flowing to them. They will siphon it off the international aid that'll be going into Gaza, as they have done for so many years. And I'm not sure any mechanisms have been put in place to prevent that from happening. So if I'm Israeli, aside from the fact you're getting your hostages back, I think it's a pretty pessimistic situation.
Okay, just to push on a couple of points. There are some people have referred to kind of, a kind of October 6th, 2023 landscape returning, albeit perhaps slowly. So in one measure of that would be, the nature of Israeli security. And here, again, back to what I said earlier about opening the aperture, it is, they have certainly degraded Hamas to a great extent, have they not? And also then to the north, Hezbollah. How would you, putting aside the issue of the hostages, which is, of course, front and center right now, Israeli security is in a very different place, is it not, than it was then, in terms of those two adversaries, north and south?
Absolutely, and I'd add a third adversary in there, and that would be Iran. I think Israel's success against Lebanese Hezbollah has been remarkable, absolutely remarkable. Their ability to really take away senior leadership, their ability to reduce the number of precision missiles that can fire deep into Israel has been a significant achievement. And their ability to not only take out the senior leaders, but the mid-level leaders through the campaign against the beepers and other communication systems. That was a particularly significant blow to Lebanese Hezbollah. Lebanese Hezbollah is on their back foot. They are not able to do that thing that Iran needed them to do, which was maintain the capability to strike with great force against Israeli population centers. Now, I believe they're probably still doing some striking up north against the border. I don't think that situation has resolved itself yet. But what I saw as the main Iranian-sponsored threat to Israel, the use of large-scale missile attack from Lebanese Hezbollah, that risk seems to have declined considerably, along with the military command and control of Hezbollah, as well as the missiles themselves, which the Israelis, I believe, have gone after with a very systematic approach, reducing that capability. And the other component of this is, of course, Iran is also now in a state as gravely weakened as they have been in my professional experience. Their air defense system has been proven to be ineffective. In fact, they are pretty much naked before another Israeli attack. Should the Israelis opt to go back and revisit Iran, the Iranians know this. And their own capabilities, their own two large missile attacks on Israel have largely been unsuccessful. So it's a very, well, I said I'm pessimistic about the Hezbollah, not the Hezbollah, but the Hamas Israeli relationship just based on what's going on there. On the other hand, Israel has done a remarkable job across the region against Lebanese Hezbollah and also against Iran. And the collapse of Bashar Assad's Syria is simply the coda, if you will, to a disastrous year for Iran. I mean, he collapsed because the three pillars that propped up his tottering regime, Lebanese Hezbollah, Iran, and Russia, were no longer able to do so. So there have been vast changes in the landscape of the region. And that is actually something the Israelis can draw strength about going forward.
I was going to ask you about Syria and to the point about drawing strength. I mean, it's not that long ago that you were running Central Command. It really is. I mean, you're better placed than many to look at this. But if you were starting that job today, General, it's a completely altered landscape, is it not, from a security standpoint?
It is. Iran is gravely weakened. Syria doesn't exist anymore. Lebanese Hezbollah, long one of our great concerns in the region, is at the very least discombobulated. But more precisely, I think they're out of the fight right now. Now, look, they may rebuild. I don't want to say this is a threat that's going to go away forever, but I think Lebanese Hezbollah has been gravely damaged and their ability to hurt Israel has been markedly reduced, at least in the short to midterm. And so there's breathing space for Israel. And of course, they're going to have to decide. I think the great challenge that we see, particularly as the new administration comes into office, is how are we going to take advantage of this remarkable opportunity? An opportunity to actually do some things in the region that could lead to long-term stability.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any thoughts on that front you want to throw out there? Or?
Well, I actually I do, and what I would say is this: Iran is at the root of most of these problems. So I think you need to look at the root. You need to look at the source of these problems. And we need to remember that the primary goal of Iranian statecraft remains preservation of the regime. Today, as you and I talk, the regime is more significantly threatened than it's been in many years. Iran will always come back to regime preservation. Now, in 1987, when the Iran-Iraq War was going bad for Iran, Supreme Leader Khomeini then did what's called, he drank from the poisoned chalice. Mm-hmm. He accepted a ceasefire with Iraq on terms that were not good for Iran in order to prevent the destruction of the Iranian regime. So that phrase, is you see it coming back. He actually said, this is as bitter to me as drinking from a poisoned chalice to do this. But he did it. The fact of the matter is, Tom, the Iranians will drink from the poison chalice again if the threat is real and manifest enough against them. We have an opportunity now, and I would argue now is the time to force them to renounce their nuclear ambitions, to agree to a monitoring regime that will actually work, and they can have a civil nuclear program, certainly, but we should look to that. We should try to get them off. If the first principle of Iranian statecraft is regime preservation, the second one is destruction of the state of Israel. We need to back them off that if we can. And I know these are aspirational goals, but these are things right now that Iran may be willing to talk about in order to preserve the regime. We just need to be careful if we do get into negotiations with Iran. The Iranians are far cleverer negotiators than they are fighters. and they tend to come out pretty well in negotiations, particularly against us. Whereas they don't necessarily perform particularly well on the battlefield. But we have an opportunity here. I guess that's the long and the short of it. We have an opportunity here.
Last question, General, back to that notion of October 6th, 2023. As you know, very, very, I don't know how far along it was, but there were discussions about an Israeli-Saudi rapprochement that kind of went away because the Saudis said from almost, as soon as Israel began its war in Gaza, we're not going to have anything to do with this until this war ends. So back to things that might turn in a different direction if the ceasefire, or when it comes into play. What do you see on that front? Is that another kind of game changer potentially?
I think whatever happens with a ceasefire in the short term, Israeli-Saudi rapprochement normalization is inevitable, and it's going to proceed. It may proceed in fits and starts. It may not move as smoothly as people thought. When we were predicting peace in the region a couple of days before October 6th, 2023. But I believe this is an inevitable thing that's going to happen, again, driven by the manifest threat of Iran, which every nation in the region recognizes.
Very interesting, as always, and really appreciate the time. General Frank McKenzie, Cipher Brief expert, former head of Central Command. Great, as always, to have you with us. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Tom. It's my pleasure.